Dear Angela, thanks so much for joining me today in our very first podcast recording of Drip by Drip Unveiling Fashion's Thirsty Truths, which is the catchy title that we picked for our very first Drip by Drip podcast. I'm very happy you joined because we've known each other for a couple of years now, even though we haven't been in touch for quite some times, getting a few babies in our lives and also changing professionally a bit. You moved from Berlin to the Netherlands, but I'm very happy that we're still in touch and very grateful for you joining me for this first episode today. Thank you.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk about water. So here I am.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we're a good match when it comes to that. So let me start. Let me start by introducing you to our audience. Angela has been working in the field of water and sanitation for forever. You've worked for various UN bodies, the UN itself, the UNDP, UNICEF. You've been you've been the project manager of a Synthesis report on SDG 6, which is on access to clean water and sanitation in 2018. So you've worked quite a lot on how we're reaching this goal or not reaching it. And I'm curious to learn a bit more about that throughout our conversation. But then later you joined the WWF, and that's how we met, because you've worked on water stewardship management with different companies, factories in different South Asian countries. And we've met through a conference, and you've been part of an event that we had. And you moved to the Netherlands now, and you're working on nature-based solutions, which is not too far from the tree, but you've changed quite a bit. What I would like to know is how you picked water to be like the main topic of your professional career.
I think this story starts in Brazil. So I come from a very small city in Brazil, and this city has a river. And this river is called the Fishes River. So Rio do Peixe, river and fish. But no one could fish on it because it was very polluted. It's an area that produces a lot of livestock, so pork meat, chicken meat, and so it was very polluted. And every time to go to school, I would cross the bridge and I would say, I'm going to do something for this river. So when I started university, I had the opportunity to do a training around water and wastewater treatment. That's what I did my master's on and my PhD. So, but always started in that city, in that river. So that's where the connection with fresh water and sanitation and wastewater treatment and nature started.
Amazing. So you started your career with the UN, and you've obviously dealt with global water resources, the management of the resources, and the pollution. Is there a shocking fact about water that you've come along throughout your career, which you feel like is underrepresented in the international discourse and something that people should know about water and water resources?
There are many things about water that I think people don't know yet, but one thing that is maybe like the basic fact is that we have the same amount of water today as we had at the beginning of times. And in 1,000 years, that's going to be the same amount of water. The amount of water is not increasing or decreasing. It's always constant. So what is changing is where this water is located. And this is important because we do have the possibility to increase, for example, water retention, soil moisture, and we are sometimes missing those opportunities. So the fact that the water is constant and people should think, okay, I cannot get more water out of space. We need to preserve and conserve the water that is here and make the best use of it. So I think that's maybe, the most basic fact, but that often gets forgotten.
Yeah, and a very important one.
There is one thing. So you mentioned UNICEF, but it was UNESCO that I worked on.
Okay.
So I don't know if
but I mentioned UNESCO too, right?
No.
I mentioned,
not that I remember.
Then maybe I mixed
UNESCO.
up those two. Good to know.
But I was like listening and said, maybe, but I didn't want to interrupt you, so that's why.
Yeah, no, that's fine, but you can interrupt me anytime if I'm
okay.
So since you mentioned that we have this one water body available in the world, can you explain how what the water cycle is, so how the groundwater and rainwater and all of that correlates with each other?
Yes, definitely. So the water cycle is water moving around, and the energy making the water move is the solar energy.
Mhm.
So the solar energy heats ponds, lakes, makes water evaporate from soils. The plants they also have this their evapotranspiration, and all this
Mhm.
water goes up to the sky and form the clouds. After some time, you see it will rain, and then from the rainwater, part of the water will infiltrate in the ground and then help to form groundwater or stay in the soil as soil moisture. And the rest will run superficially. We call it runoff. So it will get on the rivers, get on the streets, and, you know, go
Yeah.
away to a place where we often don't see. The
Mhm.
thing about the runoff is that sometimes it's going to collect either nutrients from agriculture or dust or pollution, and then it will
Mhm.
carry this to the rivers. So depending on where you are, the water can become ice or the water can continue to be river, but it will
Mhm.
eventually reach the ocean, and then there also happens the same process. The water evaporates, become clouds, rain again, and then can either become groundwater, rivers, and this circle is continuous. What
Mhm.
makes the difference for you if you are sitting in one place, and why do you have drought sometimes and other times don't have drought, is because the amount of water that evaporates here doesn't mean that it's going to be raining in the same place.
Yeah.
For example, the Amazon rainforest, it evapotranspirates a lot because it's a lot of, it's like
Mhm.
pumping water from the ground to
Very
the clouds.
humid.
Exactly. But
Mhm.
those clouds they move and they give water to the rest of Brazil and South America.
Mhm.
So that's where the cycle happens, and this is a very simplistic way to say, but doesn't mean that the water evaporating in the ocean will rain in the ocean. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, doesn't mean that the water evaporating in Germany will rain in Germany. That's why we
Yeah.
need to have this balance in the ecosystem, that we can always maintain soil moisture, maintain the forests that help this water cycle to happen, and maintain healthy oceans.
Yeah. So we always talk about only having 2.5% fresh water available globally, even though we're living on the blue planet. When you see the planet from afar, it's completely blue. How can we explain that there's only such a limited amount of water available for our consumption, human and obviously animals alike?
Yeah, so remember I said that the oceans accumulate a lot of water and then they evaporate.
Mhm.
Yes, 71% of our planet is
Mhm.
water, so the rest is land. From this 71%, I think 97% is ocean. So it is water,
Mhm.
but it's saline water. No, it's water that has other functions. And only, I think it's about 3% that is fresh
Mhm.
water.
Okay.
And from that, 2.5%, I think
Mhm.
they are either in the ice, in the glaciers, in ice, and I
Mhm.
think 0.3% is freshly and red available in the rivers and in the lakes. So
Wow.
actually, the amount of water that is, fresh water, open the tap, you
Mhm.
get water, is it's I think about 0.3%. But the
Wow.
total amount of fresh water is 2.5 to
Yeah.
3. But we
Mhm.
cannot access all that water because
Yeah.
either it's glaciers or in aquifers, so it is
Yeah.
not so easily to get it.
And why is it so hard to just filter the salient water to make it useful for humans, for drinking water purposes, for example?
Well, there are several problems linked to that. So it is a process called desalinization, and it's
Mhm.
being done. I think there is about 16,000 desalinization plants around the world, and so it is already happening. People are already using salt water, filtering it, and then using. There are some problems with this process. One is that's a very expensive process,
Mhm.
expensive and energy intensive. So if you are getting
Mhm.
less water because of climate change, does it
Mhm.
make sense for you to burn fossil fuels to get more water? Not
Mm.
that sure.
Maybe not.
Yeah. And then the second thing is that after you do the process, so you filter the water, that solid material is called brine, and it also can have
Mhm.
an impact. And we are not so good in as humankind to manage the waste we generate. So we also should be careful with that. And then there is another question, that form of water is often going to be more expensive because it's energy intensive and it is going to be generated by the sea. So is that going to be equally distributed about all of us? It's going to get more expensive, too expensive for poor people. Is that reaching people living inlands? So there are several things. Of course, you can do it, and there are many countries, especially small islands, doing it. But it should not be the silver bullet. We should not be
Yeah.
aiming to have to do that to have drinking water. We should look at the other options and manage water better instead of doing desalinization.
Yeah, of course. So you're mentioning that the management of the water resources that we have available right now is something that we might not be very good at. And as an NGO, we work a lot in textile regions in Southeast Asia, such as Dhaka in Bangladesh, but also Karachi in Pakistan. And we're faced, or we see a lot of water pollution in these areas caused by textile industry, also other industries, though. Can you explain how this pollution in the global south that is decreasing the availability of drinking water for the population, how that interacts with water stress maybe in the global north? So is there some sort of connection between like different regions in the world? If we pollute the water in one region, how does that affect other regions? And how can we feel more responsible for the water resources that we might be part of the polluting system in the global south?
That's a very interesting question because it works both ways, right? So with polluted water here, it's going to impact there and vice versa. But maybe the main connection or the clearest connection, let's say for someone in Europe, in Germany, or it's the fact that you are buying products that are often, like you said, produced in the south, in the global south.
Yeah.
And it is sad to say, but wastewater treatment is most of the times not so restrict in those countries when you have wastewater treatment plants. So all the things that are being produced are generating. So you transform a material into a product, and in this process, you are generating waste. It could be wastewater, but it could be solid waste, and all of this together is impact that will somehow stay where the product is produced. And here we get just, the clean t-shirt, but all the chemicals that were used for the cotton production, that were used for producing the thread, or for, dyeing the shirt, for example, all of those stay in the global south. So how does it affect me? Well, these people there, they are facing increased water scarcity because of also the climate changing. So they were used of having certain raining patterns. The availability of drinking water is decreasing because of the pollution of rivers. So we always talk about a very sensitive topic, which is migration, right?
Yeah.
Migration can also be generated because people don't have the living conditions to stay in their countries, and maybe they would like to stay, but if there
Of
is no
course.
water, no food, how can they do it? So it's a very sensitive topic, and it touches so many other things because water connects people, but it can also divide because you need to have enough water. And I'm not even talking only about drinking water, water. I mean, I remember Berlin, we have beautiful lakes there and you can swim on them. And can you imagine many countries, those lakes get polluted and then people cannot fish
Yeah.
anymore. They cannot use them
Yeah.
anymore. So pollution in general is a problem that has to be tackled there and here. And
Yeah.
maybe the main connection is the global supply chain. The most visible connection is the global supply chain.
Yeah, most probably. So would you say that we are currently in a water crisis already? I've read a lot about experts that say we are going to fight about water in the future world wars because water is the new gold. And in some way, the more we decrease the resources, this will be a very valuable resource, because like the availability of water will be deciding on whether some parts of the world will be livable and other parts won't be livable anymore. So would you say that we are in the midst of a looming water crisis, or are we just steering towards it?
My positive side would say that we are not, but let's be
Mm-hmm.
realistic. We have multiple crises combined at the moment. So we have the
Mm-hmm.
climate crisis that gets very famous and everyone is talking about, but we have the biodiversity crisis because we are losing species, and we have the water crisis, and the three of them are interconnected.
Yeah.
So, for example, the climate crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people experience the climate crisis through water
Mm-hmm.
because like raining patterns are changing. So if you were a farmer in Brazil or in Africa and you're used to that, you're going to have those 3 months of rain during the year, and
Mm-hmm.
that changes. And it's not that it changes, that it moves to the like to the coming month. It changes that sometimes you don't even get that rain.
Yeah.
And then how can you produce your food? So
Mm-hmm.
I think some people are really feeling it on the skin right now, not all of us,
Mm-hmm.
but the crisis is there. And I think it's the moment that we should realize that
Mm-hmm.
our actions here, or what our governments are investing on,
Mm-hmm.
what are the agendas that we are pushing, is going to influence the global water agenda, the global climate agenda, and the biodiversity, because it's so all interconnected.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't like to be negative, but we need to realize that we are in this crisis, just that it's
Mm-hmm.
more silent than, for example, the climate crisis, but it is there.
Exactly. This would be my next question. What do you think, why we read and hear a lot in the media and from politicians about carbon dioxide, and lots of fashion companies have their schemes where they try to reduce or mitigate their carbon dioxide expenses? Why are we not hearing at least the same amount of news and information about water and water consumption and pollution? Why is water not sexy enough?
Yeah, well, water is super sexy, but maybe it's multifaceted, so it's more complex. While for the climate agenda, they
Mhm.
found it easier to find one target, which is CO2. So it's easy to
Mhm.
communicate. You need to reduce your CO2 emissions. And I'm not saying that's not important, but it's
Mhm.
one thing. No, you know you need to do that thing. Companies need to reduce emissions. Countries need to stop deforestation. So it's one thing, and
Mhm.
everyone can go together towards the same goal. And we
Mhm.
should, by the way. But for water, it's more complex because the impact and the effects of water are more local. So if
Mhm.
now we are having a flood here, in another part of the world they are having a drought. So how it's very difficult to make this one narrative. Although the UN is trying, and we also trying in WWF to have this one narrative, like to push for protection of water resources. We do have a freshwater challenge campaign. Let's protect rivers. Let's protect
Mhm.
freshwater ecosystems. But it's more complex than one message like let's reduce emissions. That's let's say very important, but a simple message should be carried on. And
Yeah.
regarding the companies, I think that they do have an impact in the water they source to use in their products, but also in the waste that they generate. But I'm not sure all of them have this at heart.
Mhm.
And it's much more difficult because if you are in one river basin and we have many other actors, you do need to work together. So it's
Mhm.
not that one company in one river basin saving water can do it alone. Maybe
Yeah.
pollution, if there is just one polluting industry,
Mhm.
you could say you stop polluting and we save it. But for like water resilience in a water basin, it's more important
Mhm.
that you have this collective action. And it's in each one of the thousands and thousands of river basins we have around the world. So I think
Mhm.
both are very important. It's just that the climate crisis, uh, has a stronger narrative, and you can have everyone talking about the same thing. While the water crisis is very uh, has many
Local.
aspects you could be talking about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely understand. And would you say that we are on track of reaching SDG 6, clean water and sanitation for all? And do you think we will reach it by 2030, or is it completely impossible by now?
Okay, so SDG 6 is part of the 2030 agenda of the UN, and water and sanitation are just the first two SDGs. So the
Mhm,
first one, 6.1, is water, 6.2 is sanitation and hygiene, 6.3 is water quality,
mhm,
6.4 is water efficiency. So we
mhm,
have also 6.5 that is transboundary water and water management, and six
mhm.
six that is ecosystems. So it's
It's
much more
quite
than only
complex.
water and sanitation.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are not on track. So
Mhm,
that's to make this long story very short, we are not on track.
mhm,
But we did have progress. So especially for water and sanitation, that are targets that have been there also in the agenda that was before, that I
mhm.
forgot the name. I'm sorry,
No
but
problem.
we have this global agenda even before. So water and
Mhm,
sanitation were there, and we have numbers to track the progress, and we see that we are progressing.
mhm.
The other targets,
Interesting.
they were new, so they have just started, or they had some things that were going on, but now we are building this huge database and trying to understand how countries are progressing. So there is progress. It is slow.
Yeah.
My advice it would be, if you would ever need to say, what should we do to
Mhm,
make it faster, it would be to combine challenges.
mhm,
So you have for example, the water and sanitation challenge,
mhm,
and you have the poverty challenge. So
mhm,
why not, for example, to use treated wastewater as an
mhm,
irrigation for agriculture, and then you can treat one problem and also help to solve the poverty. So try to look at the synergies and how things can reinforce them in a positive loop. So we try to solve problems together instead of thinking on the boxes, and then we can maybe get get it faster. But as of
mhm.
now, we are not on track, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, very much. So, what would you say is something that the people listening to this podcast could do to support the water in general, to support the availability of clean, fresh water? We have a lot of discussion in Germany about using less water, which often organizations from a water background, such as the WWF or Greenpeace, say doesn't solve the crisis, because the water system in Germany is floating, and by, for example, showering one time less per week, we're not going to solve the global like water crisis. But what could we do as consumers, but at the same time activists, to protect global water resources? Is there anything we can do?
Yes. So I wouldn't tell people to shower one time less, maybe spend less time in the shower, but
Yeah.
definitely that's not gonna solve the problem. We want people to shower. It's just that,
Mhm.
maybe use less time. Don't spend 15 minutes, but maybe 5 is enough. But
Yeah.
definitely that's not gonna solve the whole problem. So there are some things that a person can do. For example,
Mhm.
and start to understand what is the water footprint of your food,
Mhm.
or your clothes, or of your holidays, or
Mhm.
think about that everything that is produced needs water. So think of that as, okay, so let's at least be aware.
Mhm.
Some things you will be able to change, others we will not. That at a personal level. At a kind of a community level, as a political animals that we are, we should be looking at what our governments are doing.
Mhm.
So, for example, the EU passed the EU restoration law. So let's have 25,000 kilometers of river free of dams in Europe. But let's
Mhm.
look in other countries. So, for example, in Brazil, we have the Pantanal area and the Cerrado, and they will they are aiming to build new dams there to then
Mm.
generate energy. But can we not generate energy from other sources? Maybe
Yeah.
solar powers. Then you will not dam those rivers. Another thing, deforestation.
Mhm.
So, like, remember we talk about this
Yeah.
freshwater cycle and the trees. So, having soil humidity and having trees is a major factor for you to keep that river basin healthy. So, think
Mhm.
about your products. Are your products actually increasing deforestation?
Mhm.
Can we help to protect forests or restore forests? Can we help to restore wetlands or protect wetlands? So all this, we always talk like development.
Mm.
Let's ourselves, but also our governments think that development doesn't need to be at odds with nature
Yeah.
or with people. We need to find the synergies where development
Mhm.
can make people to thrive, but also nature to thrive. And I think that's the only way we will be able to solve this triple crisis that we are now. That if we
Yeah.
look all together, so of course it needs
Mhm.
to benefit people. Of course it needs to benefit nature. And everyone needs to eat. everyone needs to
Yeah.
everyone wants to thrive. So
Mhm.
what are the paths that we can take uh, individually, but also as a community, as a planet, to go in that direction. And I think it's looking at your day-to-day activities, but also looking at what is that, what are is the government spending your funds on? What we
Mhm.
are, those are the things that I think would definitely help us to
Yeah.
address this crisis. And it's doing it every day, constancy.
Mhm.
We cannot just, oh, no, today I'm not going to care about it. No,
Yeah.
that's not how it works.
Yeah, it's true. And since you're working with nature-based solutions now, how can that help to address the water crisis that we're facing right now?
So, if I ask you, do you know what are nature-based solutions are?
Yes, I did my research a bit before when I prepared the podcast. And nature-based solutions, from what I understood, is trying to find solutions to the crisis and problems we have in terms of water, but also other resource issues by using nature. So, for example, when we're in a situation we have a lot of flooding, trying to figure out how was the general outline of the ecosystem before industrialization, before we build a city, like what sort of soil do we need in order to address the flooding so that the floods can be basically stored and then returned back to river basins or anything. Is that correct?
That is correct. The one thing about
I'm right.
nature-based, yeah, you did very well. Actually, you're approved.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
But that's the thing about nature-based solutions. They are this
Mhm.
umbrella concept. So you have many things that fit under
Mhm.
nature-based solutions term. And to make it very simple, you can think about working with nature and people for
Mhm.
nature and people. So we're going to try to see how with natural solutions you can help people to thrive. So it's that
Mhm.
what we've been talking about. It's okay, so how we can, for example, you use the example of the room for the rivers that here in the
Mhm.
Netherlands is very famous. So let's reconnect the floodplains.
Mhm.
Before I was telling you about the deforestation. So
Mhm.
deforestation, like protecting and conserving and restoring forest is a
Mhm.
nature-based solution that will
Mhm.
have impact also on the river flows. It
Yeah.
will have impact also in your aquifers.
Mhm.
Another thing, and that's a very nice anecdote. I went to Pantanal, to
Mhm.
Paraguay last year,
Yeah.
and we were talking to this livestock producer,
Mhm.
and all of his neighbors cut the trees because they like to look at the field and see all the cows. And then the cows
Mhm.
would go all in under the only one tree that remained, and that the grass, would not grow
Mhm.
there. So
Yeah.
that guy said, here, the temperature reaches 40 degrees. When
Mhm.
it is hot, those cows have just one tree to go underneath. How can they ever
Yeah.
grow and, be big enough to be sold if they don't eat? So in that case, nature-based solution was let's make it a silvopastoral. So you have trees in the field, you have more shade, but in that sense, you also are protecting the soil because you have the trees. The rain
Mhm.
will not touch the soil directly. You have the soil protected. You reduce erosion, so you will also not have so much sediments in the river. So it's a system that helps each other. And for the farmer, it was good because their cows would, be healthier.
Mhm.
And that's a nature-based solution. That's another
Yeah.
example. So there
Mhm.
maybe things can fit into nature-based solution. What we always have to keep in mind is that uh, we need to have a biodiversity gain. So in the case
Mhm.
of room for the river, we have, for example, you reconnect the floodplains. There is fish species that can,
Mhm.
reproduce better. Also, bird species that reproduce better, other than ecosystem services. But also you need to address a societal challenge. And then we go back to how we can solve problems. Let's try to look at solutions that provide multiple
Mhm.
benefits. And normally nature-based solution does. So in the case of the farmer, the livestock farmer in Paraguay, well, he was getting what he wanted. So he was ensuring food security,
Mhm.
he was helping with economic development. But from the nature perspective, we were reducing erosion, we were
Mhm.
helping infiltration of water, and we were also keeping more forest standing and alive. So it was good for biodiversity and for
Mhm.
jaguar corridors because that is an area where we have jaguars. So
Mhm.
nature-based solution has this benefit that is like, okay, you can solve one problem and provide multiple benefits to other.
Mhm.
One downside is that people are not so used with having nature to solve your problems. People
Mhm.
want to control nature. So if you
Yeah.
talk to someone between having this very big, very beautiful river that will expand when it floods and will contract when it when it stops raining, um, people will say no, but a dam looks much more secure because
Mhm.
we are used
Yeah.
to great infrastructure. We are used to things
Yeah.
that look solid, and nature
Mhm.
is fluid. Nature needs space,
Mhm.
and I think it's also we need to get more used to this, more used that we can use nature to solve
Mhm.
problems. And
Yeah.
that's a thing that's going to take time at university. I hope students will start learning more about that, but also government officials will be more exposed, and we need to show the cases that are actually working, and that's what we are trying to do. But
Yeah.
it's yeah, as everything, it
It's
takes
tough.
time.
Yeah. I think so too. Thank you for explaining that a little better. So we are almost at the end of our recording time. So I would like to ask a very final question, which is there any fact about water that is very important for people to understand? We started this podcast talking about the body of water, that it's one body, but is there anything that you feel like people need to understand about water in order to feel more invested in securing this resource which we all need in order to live? Is there anything that we haven't mentioned today which you feel like people need to hear?
Well, people can go, I think, several days without eating, but you
Hmm.
cannot go, I think it's one day without drinking. So just from that perspective, water is the most important resource for you to survive. And I think I would ask people to really keep an eye on not only as water is managed where you live, but globally. Because in order to save, to stay alive as a species, we will need water. So we will need to manage this water better. We will need to share this water equally
Hmm.
between rich people and poor people, but also give it to species because we do need. Also, nature needs water. So
Yeah.
I think that water is a very good connection, like for
Hmm.
people. Um, and we should cherish it. We
First.
should really, yeah, understand how it is important, and that you couldn't go without it for even a day.
Yeah, perfect. The perfect closing word, but I have to ask a very last question, which just came
Ooh.
up my mind. What's the status of the river now that made you go into water or becoming an expert on water in your hometown? Did it improve, or is it still in a poor state?
Um, well, people still don't fish there,
Mm,
unfortunately, but I would say that things improved because
right.
Brazil improved the legislation around the release of effluents.
Mhm,
Also, I think as my area is very agricultural area, right?
mhm,
So we did have a lot of manure that was, just released on the river. That doesn't happen anymore. I
mhm,
think that so because the legislation, the regulation is stronger, people are respecting it better. I think the main problem in our river right now is that the conversion of land from forest, from natural land, into
mhm,
agriculture or into new urban areas is being very fast. So we are
mhm,
having a lot of increased floods that reach the cities, and you have a lot of soil being lost. So I think it's more this management of
mhm.
the water inside of a landscape perspective that we need to get better.
Mhm.
And yeah, every time I go back there, I say, okay, one day I'm gonna do something for you. I'm trying.
Yeah, perfect. I'm sure you are. And not only for this river, but for the global water resources, which is even more
Hopefully, yeah.
admirable. Yes, you are. Thank you, Angela.
Thank
So
you.
thanks for being the first guest and educating us a bit more about water resources, where they come from, how important they are, and how important it is that we protect them. It was lovely to see and speak to you again, and I hope that we see each other or hear each other soon again. Have a lovely day.
Hopefully, you too. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.